Hello, welcome to today's video. Today we are going to go on a walking tour of Midtown East. So let's just get started here. This is New York City. There's Manhattan, Brooklyn's down here, Queens is right here, the Bronx, and then Staten Island's over towards that way. So here's Manhattan as a whole. This is downtown, this is the Upper East Side, Upper West Side, Midtown's right here, and then Midtown East is kind of this section, so it's kind of that little corner notched off. So let's get a little bit, zoom in just a little bit more. This is kind of that section that is knocked off. Central Park just starts right there. We're actually going to start today's tour here at Grand Central. We'll save a tour of Grand Central for another day. But we're going to come out of Grand Central, walk down 42nd Street. We're going to walk right by the Chrysler Building, go all the way down to the United Nations, which is over here, and then we're going to head up First Avenue. We'll cut across somewhere here in the middle of the 50s, 50, 51st, something along those lines. Then we'll kind of snake our way up, eventually ending up on 5th Avenue. We'll walk by Trump Tower and then conclude right at the Plaza Hotel in the corner of Central Park. So this is a little bit of a longer walking tour. I apologize if it gets a little mundane, but you can always fast forward or anything like that if you want to see any specific parts. And as always, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you have any questions or any other neighborhoods around here in New York City you would like to see a walking tour of. Sit back and enjoy the video. Thanks, guys. Alright, so as I mentioned, we're going to start the tour in Grand Central Station. I apologize for the shaky camera. I was going to try to use kind of a method to stabilize this a little bit. Didn't end up working out. So once again, I apologize for the little shaky camera. Here's 42nd Street. We're just walking out. This is Perishing Square. You've probably seen it in the movies and stuff like that. And then up here on the left, that's the Hyatt Hotel, or the Grand Hyatt. That's actually the hotel that kind of put Donald Trump on the map. That was his first major project here in New York City. Kind of an interesting tidbit. There are a few documentaries and stuff about Donald Trump. And they don't really mention that that hotel is more or less connected or even part of Grand Central Station. So we're going to walk down 42nd Street, and we'll eventually end up at the United Nations, and then we'll cut north. Those food trucks. I'm a big supporter of food trucks, but my goodness, they need to turn off their generators, figure out a different way to power their light source. If you notice, there's this building on the left that says retail space for lease. One thing that's pretty striking here in New York City is how many places remain vacant for a very long time. This is actually the Chrysler Building, one of the main key points. You can't really see the top of it there, but this is one of the main key aspects of the New York City skyline. It's just basically right across the street from Grand Central Station, which is kind of cool. Oh, but what I was getting at with the places for lease, is they remain vacant for a very long time. And it's kind of striking that how expensive real estate is here. However, a lot of these companies, they don't seem to be in any hurry to find a client. Now, I apologize that every now and then I turn the camera on its side like that. That's just to make sure it's actually still recording.
This is 3rd Avenue. Kind of goes all the way north and south of Manhattan. So 42nd Street, which is the street we're actually walking on, we're kind of on the far east side of Manhattan. But on the west side of Manhattan, this is basically where Times Square is. So Times Square is more or less directly behind us, a solid mile or so. It's quite far away, but this is definitely one of the, if not the main streets in Manhattan. This is 2nd Avenue, and this bar up here on the left, it's famous. I don't know if they still do this or not, but on Wednesdays they used to serve like dollar beers or something, just insanely cheap. It used to be packed on Wednesday nights. You'll notice there's these concrete barriers, and it's actually because we're getting pretty close to the United Nations. I believe that's why they have these here. And this is in this area when the General Assembly is in session. There's about 2 weeks that this area is just, the security is very strict, very high, and you can't hardly get through in any of these streets. I'm really surprised that some of these businesses don't put up more of a fight, because if you own a restaurant or something and half your clientele or your customer base is shooed away, good luck making any money. And 2 weeks is significant. If your rent for a restaurant is, let's just say, $4,000, $5,000 a month, which is, that's probably on the cheaper side here in Manhattan, going 2 weeks without a solid customer base could definitely. There's a cool park up here on the left. Maybe I'll go up there one of these days. But to go two or 3 weeks without any customers or a solid customer base would be pretty significant. But you never hear about any problems that these restaurant owners or business owners have. This is, I guess, a tour from the United Nations. But this was shot on a Sunday, so you'll notice that traffic isn't too extreme today. And outside of Manhattan, the weekends traffic is actually worse. But inside of Manhattan, traffic is definitely much, much lighter on the weekends. You can see all these barriers that the NYPD has stacked up there on the left. So directly ahead of us is going to be what they call the East River. I don't think we get a shot of it, but it's just beyond the United Nations. And then this is now the United Nations that is in front of us. Of course, it was built shortly after World War II. And it's pretty cool. The visitor center in there is cool. There are definitely plenty of activities that don't cost anything to get in. There are definitely things that do cost things. It's kind of interesting that the United Nations is taking a stance, no single-use plastic. New York City is just so quintessential for disposable products, in my opinion, way worse than outside of the city. Just you see any restaurant you go to, they never make anything to stay. It's almost always to go in disposable containers. And this is First Avenue on the left. That's what we're walking on. It's the new U.S. consulate to the United Nations, conveniently across the street. That's brand new. That was under construction when I first moved here a couple years ago. There's a lot of these buildings on the left that are more or less brand new. Definitely a huge kind of skyscraper building boom here in New York City. Even if you look at the skyline, just on September 11th, which is of course one of the most infamous days here in New York City, definitely a lot of shots of the skyline. And then you look at the skyline today, it's dramatically changed, and that's only 18 years, which might sound like a lot, but it's really not that much. So just a heads up, there's security to get into the United Nations is on the right. However, if you're going to be visiting there, that's not where you initially need to go. There's the visitor center on the left, and that's where you're going to check in. They'll check your ID and stuff like that, give you a little badge to get in, and then you go to go through security on the right. There's all the flagpoles for all the nations of the United Nations. I guess it's Sunday, so that may be why they don't have them up. That's Trump Tower, kind of directly in front of us. One of the Trump Towers. That's not the really famous one up on 57th Street. We will walk past the really famous one, but that's one of Trump's developments here in Manhattan. If you're ever wondering what these things are, you see them scattered around. Pretty rare to see them outside like this. They're mostly in the subway. I believe that those are air quality monitors to just make sure that the air quality is acceptable. Some statues and stuff inside of the United Nations. If you go in there, you can actually walk around in there, I believe. Look at this fence here. It just looks like trash. My goodness. This is one thing that just drives me nuts about New York City. Everything, they build like something temporary, and they end up leaving it permanent, and it just ends up looking like trash. A perfect example of that are the temporary barricades that surround the courthouse downtown. Those have been up for years. I mean, my goodness, if you're going to put a barricade up, like, make it look at least decent. Don't just put up temporary things and expect them to be permanent. This is 52nd Street, I believe. We'll cut across here. It's a nice shady area for us to walk in the shade, stay out of the sun. There's a whole bunch of consulate generals around here. They're not only concentrated in this area, but in general, most of them are because of the United Nations. And it's really, that's one of the things that's really convenient about being here in New York City. If you need a visa to a country or anything like that, you can just go straight to one of the consulate generals. You don't have to worry about mailing in your passport or anything like that. Sometimes there's some processing time. They might hold your passport for a day or two, but nothing too significant. We actually used to live, my wife's from Thailand, we used to live right next to the Thai consulate. It was really convenient. There's this general store, this bodega that closed up here. That's kind of sad. That was a really cool place. Definitely too expensive. I can understand why it closed up, but we're going to hurry across the street. But I can understand why it closed up, but kind of sad that all those places are closing. Seems like every place is either Starbucks there on the left or a bank or a CVS. This is pretty close to where I used to live. This is kind of my old stomping grounds when I lived in Manhattan. This bar, Cornerstone, it's a cool little place. It actually is connected to like 2 or 3 other bars. One of them's name is the Stag's Head. Definitely a nice little place to chill out. Good beer selection, good food. Highly recommended. This place on the left used to be a food emporium, which was one of the few places that you could get affordable food here in Manhattan, and naturally it closed up and a CVS took its place. Bar, Turtle Bay on the left. It's supposed to be pretty famous. Looks like it actually closed up. I think that was a for rent. I wasn't paying attention when I walked by, but I think that was a for rent sign there. Interesting. They had some unfortunate events happen there. Some violence and fights and stuff a couple of years ago. I don't know if that had anything to do with them closing up or not. Up ahead of us, we'll walk underneath this building. That's the Lipstick Building. That place is also pretty famous. That's on the 17th floor of that building is where Bernie Madoff ran his Ponzi scheme. And, it's just every now and then you'll hear on the news or something like that, someone say, oh, the Lipstick Building. And that's the building that they're talking about. It looks like a tube of lipstick that's been opened. I don't walk by it, but about 1 block over is kind of a famous corner. I believe it's 51st or 52nd and Lexington Avenue, which is very close to this area. It's like literally if we just kept going straight. And there's actually a grate there that is the famous one where Marilyn Monroe was standing and her dress blows up. That's a very famous photo, and that's where it actually took place. Of course, we're walking underneath the Lipstick Building right now, which is kind of cool. A bunch of private equity firms and whatnot that are in there. This is kind of a famous church up here on the left. If you look up the city building, unfortunately I don't get a good shot of the city building, but it's the building that is built kind of on like a plus sign. It doesn't have four corners, and they built it directly on top of this building. The city building is a huge building here in Manhattan. Definitely a dominant part of the Manhattan skyline, and they actually built it right on top of this building. I wish I would have gotten a better shot of it. This is Lexington Avenue. Once again, it's Sunday, so there's not a lot of traffic here. I assure you, during the week, there's way more traffic. We're coming up on Park Avenue. If you look to the left, I believe I'll get a shot of it here in a little bit. There's the old Pan Am building, which is now the MetLife building, and that more or less sits right on top of Grand Central Station, and then that's looking up to Midtown East, or excuse me, the Upper East Side. I apologize for the wind noise. It's a cool little building. Kind of looks like Petra. This is the infamous 5th Avenue. We'll cut north here. We'll start heading towards Central Park and the Plaza Hotel and Trump Tower. I know I mentioned Trump Tower, Donald Trump, a lot in this video. I'm not going to get into my political views. I don't want anyone to think that I'm a friend or a foe. It's just, I think it's interesting. Whenever you hear some of these properties being talked about on the news or wherever else, you know, it's just kind of obscure. No one exactly puts two and two together, exactly where they are or what they look like, things like that. And I just think it's interesting to kind of be able to put the puzzle pieces together. Yeah, so up there on the right, that's the famous Trump Tower, the one that our president has his residence at on the top 2 or 3 stories. And you'll notice when we get close that it is completely barricaded off, which is kind of annoying. And this is also annoying. They've got this sidewalk completely closed off. Some of you may have seen the documentary Bill Cunningham's New York. This is the famous intersection that he used to take photographs at. And I actually met him a couple months before he passed away. And he was on this corner in his blue jacket taking photos. And I asked to take a photo with him. He wasn't very happy that I asked that, which is okay. I understand that. I'm sure there's a lot of people that want to be photographed with him, and it can get a little annoying. Nuts. There's all these nuts for sale places. Something I've never understood about New York City. The famous Apple store is kind of on the right here. It's a little bit tough to see. It's under construction, so you got the cube that you can't really see. And then the current Apple store is in the former FAO Schwarz store, which is also famous, up here on the right. Yeah, FAO Schwarz was right there on the right, and then you got the Apple Cube. There's the Plaza Hotel, and we're on the southeast corner of Central Park right now. So we'll continue walking a little bit further. We're going to go past the Plaza Hotel, and then we will conclude this tour there. This is a nice little fountain area. I'm really surprised that I'm not sure if it's privately owned or if it's public property or some sort of a collaboration between the two. I'm really surprised that they don't take better care of this area. It's always kind of covered in pigeon poop, which is one of the reasons why I never really came around here and hung out here. But it's super pretty. It's I'm really surprised that they don't take better care of it. Maybe the owners of it don't really want too many people hanging out here. Here's, of course, the Plaza Hotel. Some street performers there. And this is a cool little area. A couple years ago when we had the big solar eclipse, this is where my wife and I came to enjoy it, and we had a really good time. We were actually standing right next to that statue on the right. I can't remember what the name of that statue is, but it's pretty famous. So we'll conclude the tour right here. Thanks for watching, guys. If you guys have any other neighborhoods here in New York City or outside of the city that you'd like me to tour, give a little narrative on, just let me know in the comments section below. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And you guys have a wonderful day. Take care.